It is no longer news that the US economy is crashing, but have you ever wondered which states will collapse first? Well, it could be the state you live in, because behind the glossy numbers of Wall Street and the political speeches about resilience lies a truth no one wants to confront. And while Washington boasts about GDP and job creation, entire regions are buckling under crushing debt, rotting infrastructure, and economic models that simply don't work anymore. Steel towns are gutted. Farmlands are drained. Tourist economies are abandoned. Just a few days back, the New York Fed showed that household finances are on a downward spiral. Meanwhile, the local systems meant to help people, schools, hospitals, police, are already breaking down. But here's the kicker. Most Americans won't realize it's happening until the ripple becomes a tidal wave. In this report, we're diving into 10 US states on the brink of financial collapse. Each one tells a different story of mismanagement, neglect, or just bad luck. So ask yourself this: is your state already cracking at the seams? And by the time people start asking questions, it's already too late. Subscribe and keep watching. What you're about to see may be the future for millions of Americans. Let's start with Illinois, a state that has become a case study in what happens when long-term obligations collide with short-term politics. Behind Chicago's iconic skyline and rich history lies a fiscal time bomb few leaders are willing to defuse. The state holds a notorious distinction: the worst-funded public pension system in America. As of 2024, Illinois' unfunded pension liabilities topped $218 billion, and that figure continues to grow. Years of avoidance and political compromise have led to a staggering outcome. Pension contributions now consume over 25% of the state's general fund. That's money once earmarked for schools, infrastructure, and public health, now swallowed by promises made decades ago. To plug the gap, Illinois leans on sky-high property taxes, some of the steepest in the country. But that fix is bleeding the state dry. As homeowners flee, so does the tax base. Since 2013, Illinois has endured 11 straight years of population loss, with over 340,000 residents packing up and leaving. The consequences are everywhere. In Chicago, violent crime persists, public schools remain chronically underfunded, and municipal debt has ballooned past $35 billion. Yet, no serious blueprint exists to reverse the trend. Political leaders remain locked in a cycle of blame and inaction, seemingly hoping the reckoning will fall on someone else's watch. And when the next recession hits, Illinois won't just be vulnerable, it may already be functionally insolvent. But while Illinois crumbles under the weight of broken promises, some states never had much to begin with. Enter Mississippi, where poverty isn't new, it's permanent. The state is not simply struggling, it is hemorrhaging. As of 2024, the U.S. Census Bureau reports that 18% of its population lives below the federal poverty line, the highest in the nation. In some rural counties, especially in the Delta region, child poverty rates exceed 40%, a figure more reminiscent of sub-Saharan Africa than the world's largest economy. What's worse is that these numbers barely budge year to year, suggesting not a temporary setback, but a long-term collapse in social mobility. In 2024, the state of Mississippi hit a terrifying milestone. Only 5.2% of wage and salary workers in the entire state were part of a union. That's not just low, it's shockingly low. To put it bluntly, Mississippi now has one of the weakest organized labor forces in America. This number is 47% lower than the national average for unionized workers. Nearly half. While the rest of the country already struggles with shrinking union power, Mississippi is practically in free fall. Even worse, this isn't a one-off statistical fluke. Just a year ago, in 2023, 7% of Mississippi workers were in unions. That means in just 12 months, Mississippi lost nearly a third of its union workforce. Let that sink in. Almost 1 in 3 union jobs vanished in a year. In 2023, over half of the state's rural hospitals were operating at a loss, and several are on the verge of permanent closure. And if a national recession hits, Mississippi may simply not survive it. With no financial cushion and minimal economic diversification, entire counties risk demographic collapse, depopulation, shuttered public services, and a retreat from modernity. If Mississippi is quietly fading, Louisiana is going down in flames, literally. From hurricanes to oil busts, its collapse is anything but silent. Jazz, Creole food, and festival culture mask a grim reality. This is a state spiraling into financial dysfunction. With a poverty rate of 18.9%, according to state data, it is one of the poorest states in the country. But unlike Mississippi's silent suffering, Louisiana's decline is loud, explosive, and increasingly irreversible. The state's economy is married to oil and gas. About 20% of its GDP is directly or indirectly tied to fossil fuels. In a world rapidly transitioning to renewable energy and exposed to global oil price volatility, this is an economic death pact. When oil prices crash, Louisiana bleeds. And they do crash. The 2020 collapse in oil prices put the jobs of 23,000 people on the chopping board in the state within just 6 months. Since then, the economy has never fully recovered. Natural disasters are a relentless torment. Since 1980, Louisiana has faced over $310 billion in damages from hurricanes, floods, and storms, according to NOAA. Hurricane Ida alone caused $75 billion in losses in 2021. Yet, insurance companies are pulling out. By 2024, 13 insurers had left the state or declared insolvency, leaving homeowners stranded without coverage and crushing local real estate markets. Educational outcomes are dismal. The state ranks 46th in public education quality according to U.S. News & World Report, and ACT scores for Louisiana high schoolers are consistently among the lowest nationally. Healthcare is equally bleak. Louisiana's health outcomes are the worst in the country. High rates of obesity, maternal deaths, and chronic disease mean residents are not just poor. They're physically fragile. A crisis waiting to explode. The state's rainy day fund is practically evaporated, barely $800 million as of 2024, even as budget shortfalls balloon past $1.6 billion. Federal bailouts have become lifelines, not exceptions. And with climate models projecting increasingly frequent Category 4 and 5 storms in the Gulf, Louisiana may soon be uninsurable, ungovernable, and uninhabitable for millions. One more oil bust, one more major hurricane, one more federal pullback. That's all it may take for Louisiana's facade of normalcy to crack beyond repair. We move over to Michigan, a state that was once synonymous with industrial might. Now Michigan is an icon of decline, and not just in Detroit. In a chilling sign of what's unfolding across rural America, farm bankruptcies in Michigan in 2024 skyrocketed by 55% compared to the previous year. Yes, more than half again, as many farms collapsed in just 12 months. Families who've worked the land for generations are now being forced to walk away from their barns, tractors, and futures. Even real estate, once a stable asset, is now a liability. In Flint, the average home price is still under $50,000. Entire neighborhoods sit boarded up, fire-damaged, or collapsed under the weight of neglect. And the state's pension obligations, already underfunded by $10 billion, pose an existential threat to future budgets. Michigan is at the mercy of macroeconomic forces it cannot control, and a single major industry shock could send its fragile economy into a tailspin. From the Rust Belt to the Sun Belt, no region is immune. And in Texas, growth may be the mask that hides its slow-motion unraveling. At first glance, Texas appears invincible. Being home to 4 of the nation's fastest-growing metro areas, a powerful energy industry, and a thriving tech sector, it projects confidence and swagger. But look beneath the skyline of Austin or Houston, and a darker picture emerges. One of rising inequality, crumbling rural America, and mounting debt. Texas ranks first in the nation for resident financial distress. with nearly 36% of adults struggling to pay bills or facing default, according to the Urban Institute. The state has no income tax and relies heavily on property taxes, which are among the highest in the country. This disproportionately affects low-income households and rural residents, many of whom live in trailer parks or rapidly depreciating manufactured homes. The urban boom cannot indefinitely subsidize rural collapse, nor can the oil rigs of the Permian Basin shield the state from a volatile global economy. The bigger the giant, the harder the fall. And the tremors have already begun. Then we have the state of Hawaii, a place that evokes a vision of utopia, turquoise waters, gentle trade winds, and perpetual sunshine. But beneath this image of paradise lies a staggering economic fragility that has turned the Aloha State into one of America's most precarious financial ecosystems. Nearly everything in Hawaii must be imported: fuel, food, building materials, making the cost of living 88% higher than the national average. The median home price in Honolulu now exceeds $800,000, and rents rival those of San Francisco. Over 40% of local households spend more than a third of their income on housing, a clear sign of a population buckling under economic pressure. Between 2020 and 2024, over 24,000 residents relocated, many citing unaffordable housing and poor job opportunities. Hawaii's public debt has soared past $28 billion, a staggering burden for a state with just 1.4 million residents. Hawaii may be paradise under pressure, but it's not alone. Another state gambling on tourism is facing the odds and losing. Next is Nevada, renowned as a gambler's haven, but increasingly, it's the state itself that's gambling with its future. With over 25% of employment tied to the hospitality and leisure sector, Nevada's economic structure is not just vulnerable, it's structurally brittle. Housing has rebounded since the last crisis, but the fundamentals remain perilous. More than 30% of Nevadans have no emergency savings. The median wage in service sector remains below $18 an hour, while the cost of rent and utilities has soared. State revenues rely heavily on gaming taxes and tourism-related sales, volatile sources that dry up during downturns. Despite this, Nevada has avoided implementing a state income tax, a political badge of honor that may soon become an economic noose. Meanwhile, New Mexico presents a paradox wrapped in bureaucracy. A staggering 32% of the state's GDP is tied to federal spending, making it less a state economy than an administrative satellite of Washington. Federal cutbacks, defense realignment, or even a shutdown threaten to devastate entire regions. Worse still, New Mexico suffers from chronic private sector underdevelopment. Major corporations avoid it. Innovation hubs bypass it. The state's per capita income ranks near the bottom nationally, and almost 18% of residents live in poverty. High school graduation rates remain among the lowest in the country, while opioid addiction, food insecurity, and underfunded healthcare continue to drag on any prospects of future growth. It raises an almost absurd contradiction. How does a state filled with physicists and classified projects remain so economically stagnant? What happens when the federal money dries up and there's nothing in place to replace it? Another state in danger is Alaska. A place that was once a land of promise and pipeline prosperity is now a state teetering on obsolescence. Its economy is dangerously dependent on oil revenues, which have fallen over the past decade due to volatile global prices and the rise of renewable energy. As of 2024, over 85% of Alaska's unrestricted general fund came from oil-related revenue. When oil prices drop, the entire state budget implodes. Alaska's permanent fund, once a model of sovereign wealth management, now functions as a political bargaining chip, with annual payouts to residents shrinking and funding battles intensifying. Outmigration has become a silent crisis. For 12 years straight, Alaska lost residents and only slightly gained in 2024, which was the first time since 2011. Young professionals and families are abandoning rural towns where services have collapsed, schools have shuttered, and infrastructure has rotted. Extreme geography adds to the economic isolation. Alaska has among the highest per capita infrastructure costs in the nation, making economic diversification prohibitively expensive. It is a state designed for one industry, with little resilience to change. Alaska's cold isolation hides its economic fragility. But on the opposite end of the map, West Virginia tells a similar story, just with coal instead of oil. West Virginia isn't just in decline, it's already fallen. From 2010 to 2022, coal jobs in the state dropped from 21,000 to 14,000. What remains is a ghost economy haunted by the ashes of a former giant. The social consequences are dire. Nearly 30% of the population depends on government aid. Disability claims are rampant. The opioid epidemic ravages towns where coal used to pay the bills. The state's population is shrinking, aging, and increasingly unwell. Charleston, once bustling, now faces an existential demographic crisis. Too many retirees, too few working-age residents, and a vanishing tax base. West Virginia is the clearest example of systemic collapse in slow motion. Its economy has not transitioned, it has simply withered. Attempts at retraining workers or attracting new industries have met with limited success, undermined by poor education outcomes, bad infrastructure, and a reputation for legal and environmental instability. These are just the first cracks. If you want to stay ahead of the collapse, subscribe now and join us in exposing the truth behind the headlines.